Alright, welcome back to the SuperCoach NRL channel and welcome to Team List Tuesday. At least the first part of Team List Tuesday. We'll get the 4 teams playing in Vegas very shortly in a few minutes' time. So we'll have a look at that and start to piece together our SuperCoach team for this season. But before we get stuck into that, just a quick plug for the draft league that we've got. As you can see, we've got 9 teams out of 10, just chasing one more team. And then we can obviously get stuck into things like setting the draft order and starting to make plans around that. So the league code there, 620418. So that's in the draft section, obviously not the classic. So yeah, if you're interested, jump on. Keeping in mind that we are going to do it the Monday after round 1 finishes. So essentially for the next week or two, we're going to get stuck in, get our head-to-head or classic teams organised, and then we'll have a go at the draft. Once we've had a look at most of the teams, obviously the Tigers won't play in round 1, but having a look at most of the teams, how they're shaping up, and get a bit more of an idea before we get into the draft. So just give that a quick plug. Final spot available in that. We do have some spots available in classic leagues as well, which we'll get to, I guess, at the end of the video, rather. But we've got a couple of minutes until the team list drops, so I guess just a bit of a quick discussion about general structure, because really that's all we can do at this point. We're only going to have a quarter of the teams named at this 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock Sydney time, 3 o'clock here in Brisbane. But it's about making sure that your structure is where you're happy with. So I guess for me, what I've done is I've still got the 2 higher price hookers. Obviously, hoping that Coruscant becomes a keeper option. Obviously, Harry Grant doesn't need much pumping up, but Coruscant with his goal kicking and Benji Marshall want to play a pretty attacking brand of footy, which I think suits Coruscant's game. So I'm sort of banking on him as the second hooker. If I had a little bit more money, I would be interested in the likes of Marshall King with his nice buy schedule. Sort of would complement Harry Grant well, and it could be very much set and forget in the hooker spots, but I don't know if we're going to have that much cash. So Coruscant's okay. Also having a round 1 buy player might seem, a bit of a waste. We want to try to generate cash as quickly as we can, but it does allow for the loophole to be used. So, I've got currently Ponga and Cleary. So if Ponga goes off on that, it's pretty early, the Thursday night game against the Raiders, all I have to do is swap Coruscant with Harry Grant because they don't play till Friday night. So I can do that swap on the Friday, put the C on Coruscant, and obviously bank Ponga's points. Which obviously, if you're trying to get 25 playing players, or sorry, 30. How many do we have? I can't remember. Brain has completely faded. So 13 on the field and then 12, 25, yeah. I was thinking of AFL has 30. Too many SuperCoach and fantasy games on at the moment. So yeah, so your squad of 25, obviously 25 playing players is ideal. But I guess realistically, if you're carrying like the Titans players or even the Dolphins players, they have a buy in the first 3 rounds as well. So realistically, you're not getting their price rises till round 4. So, carrying a Tiger isn't the worst. I think Coruscant is probably the best option just given the lack of cheapies at hooker. Also, maybe Galvin does get a good run in the team, but at bottom dollar, we can always trade him in round 4 if we need to. Alex Seyfarth's another option, perhaps in your second row. It just depends on your structure. But then, yeah, with the front rowers, trying to go fairly light, so going with 2 mids and 2 cheapies. We're not expecting massive cash rises from Totola and May. but they'll just do their job. Bit of an increase. Um, and we've got Willison. It all depends whether he gets named on the bench. Word is he might just miss out. He might be on the sort of extended reserves, but we'll find out very shortly. It has just ticked over past 3, so I'll just quickly talk about the rest of the structure. Just gone mid price essentially in the second row. I did slip Viliami for feeder in there as a bottom dollar piece. It sounds like he's a good chance of getting that bench spot. And this could create a bit of an issue if he doesn't get a run, because we've got to try and find another cheap option in the second row. We do have a few centres that could swing up, so it may be a centre winger that's got to come in that place. And then the back line, so Cleary and Hines, just the two big boys, don't want to miss out on any of their scores. Same deal with Ponga and having Pappenhausen. And we've gone with Dylan Brown still, so there is still, maybe a thing where if we really need cash, we we could go to say Kyle Flanagan, but ideally, in an ideal world, we'll be able to hang on to Brown. So just sort of having these big pieces in place like Coruscant, like Brown, just means that we are prepared for the worst case scenario. KO Weeks is another example of that. Obviously, if Ethan Strange gets the 6, we can do the quick swap and it'll actually free up another 40k, which we could potentially use to say upgrade to a picky, who's just in there at the moment because it sounds like he's going to play the first few weeks with CNK being injured. We're not expecting a massive amount of cash generation from him straight away. If we can, we may try and hold him in case of another injury or, another opportunity comes up in their backline perhaps. But, you know, at the moment, this isn't the ideal pick. But, it's with the money we've got, it's probably the best we can do. I guess if we decide we need to chop Dylan Brown, we can chop Dylan Brown. But, I guess really the key pieces that we're looking at is Ben Travojevic, who should be named on the edge. Piakora, see if he gets named. He was under a bit of an injury cloud. Toller and May, making sure they're in the team. And then I guess Willison, like I said, he may be out. But because he's at that 265, we do have a couple of downgrade options. But it is just past 3 o'clock, so let's refresh and have a look at the Vegas teams. The tension is building with the slow internet. Here we go. So game 1, the Rabbitohs and the Eagles. So the Eagles, it looks pretty well what we expected. So Tommy Turbo at the back, um, Saab and Paulo on the wings, Kulo, Garrick in the centres, Brooks and Jerry Evans. The forwards, so Paseka and Allier to start. Ben Travojevic in the second row, so lock him in your teams. And then the bench, so Carl Lawton, you'd imagine, would cover, probably edge and hooker if needed. So I know he's pretty cheap, like a 230k option. And then Waddell, Bullimore, and Nathan Brown. So you'd imagine they'd rotate through the middle. Maybe Waddell could cover an edge if they wanted to spell Travojevic, for example. Or if there's an outside back injury, Travojevic would probably slide out and Waddell would cover in there. But he can play through the middle as well, I suppose. Should have a look at their extended bench. So Brad Parker, I saw he played in the trial last week, so they've flown him over. Just obviously trying to get some reps for him in the second row. So it looks like they've got all bases covered. Aaron Woods in the middle, Tommy Talau for centre, Vega on the wing, Parker in the second row, Jake Arthur in the sort of halves and hooker, I suppose. Yeah, good stuff. And from the Rabbitohs side of things, so the Latrell, Alex Johnston, Isaiah Tass, Richie Kennar, Jacob Gagai on the wing. So there for a while I was super keen on Gagai, bringing him in as a bottom dollar cheapie. It sounds like he's only on the Vegas trip because Isaac Thompson couldn't get a visa to go to the US. So you imagine next week Isaac Thompson will drop back in that spot, and we'll lose Jacob Gagai. So maybe in fantasy, where he would get a price rise, it might be worth a punt. But I think for Supercoach, we put a line through Gagai just because he won't get the games to make any cash. Walker and Ilias in the halves is pretty standard. So Sean Kepi partnering to Toller in the starting team, which is nice. Kyle Matangi and Arrow on the edge. So it'll be interesting to see if Kyle Matangi does make that shift to the left, as it was suggested preseason. Cam Murray at hook, lock, so primed candidate for our teams. And then Havili, Host, Mawali, and Burgess on the bench. So I guess Havili covers Cook and any middle sort of rotation. Host could cover an edge. So Taylor Duncan in the 18, so we were keen on him getting a run, but he'll probably be 18th man, you'd imagine. Cheekan, Shaq Mitchell, so similar to Manly's bench, they've covered all bases on the reserves list. I think they have an extra one just because of the fact that they've got to be in America for it. So you can't just fly someone in last minute. All right, Roosters and Broncos are the other two. So for the Roosters, with Dom Young out, they've gone with Tupou, Swali rather on the wings, Billy Smith and Manu in the centres. So again, all pretty standard. Siwa Wong and Tupanua on the edges, so that's interesting. That Butcher coming off the bench, and Angus Crichton missing the squad. So that is really interesting. Spencer Leniu starting with Terrell May coming off the bench. Nat Butcher on the bench is interesting because he can play through the middle as well. So, what do we do with Terrell May? Remains to be seen. That's something to think about, I suppose. Who's on that bench? Egan Butchers in the reserves, Angus Crichton, Connor Watson. So yeah, again, most sort of bases covered there in the reserves. And for the Broncos, Dane Mariner getting the wing spot over Corey Oates, who's in number 18. So I thought Oates had the job, but Dane Mariner getting the shout on the wing. Jesse Arthur's on the other wing, so I know he's pretty cheap in NRL fantasy. Haven't really looked at him for Supercoach. But Ezra Mam and Reynolds, Corey Jensen starting, Pierre Cora name, so that's nice, lock him in. And Xavier Willison getting the job on the bench at 17. So I think that might be enough for me to lock him into my team. Just, we'll take the known factor at this stage, even though we don't necessarily know the minutes. Kobe Hetherington could probably play some decent minutes with Carrigan shifting up to the front row. As a lock, Fletcher Baker will probably play some good minutes. So, they may use Willison on the edge a bit. He probably is the most mobile of those three. And Smoothie obviously will rotate with Billy Walters. So I guess in terms of Supercoach relevance, we probably covered the key points. Pierre Cora's in. I guess just going back to the top, Ben Travojevic, I think you lock him in for sure. After that, it's really just your choice. Personally, I'd sort of lean against starting any of the fullbacks. They've talked about the field there in Vegas is quite narrow, so there won't be as much room to move. It may sort of be good for someone like Travojevic who likes to, get in amongst the rough and tough, tumble in the middle. But someone like Latrell who likes to sort of, float onto that edge and try to work some of the space might, suffer a little bit. Same sort of deal with Tedesco and Reece Walsh. Although Reece Walsh is more that speed, but he does like that nice cutout pass. Again, not as much room to cut people out. Tedesco, he's probably a bit more like Tommy Turbo working through the middle. So, I guess you could go that way if you wanted to. But otherwise, yeah, I think, lots of sort of fairly established players there. So it's really just whoever you like, I think, is fine. So I guess with our Supercoach teams, we don't have to do too much. Obviously, Ben Trebojevic is locked in. Um, yeah, so I'll just be in the front row. Terrell May with Nat Butcher going back to the bench. Um, yeah, and then I guess, if you're looking at Siwa Wong as an option at 462, obviously I've got Kikau in that sort of slot. So do you lock him in, or do you bring in, can't spell, Tupanua? Just under 400k could be, a nice value option. I think I'd rather just have a look before I commit to those guys. I'm happy to. I think there's enough options next week that I can shuffle around if need be. Even from the team that's listed here, we've still got Sean Lane, obviously. Bo Fermor is an option. Kai Pierce Paul if he gets the start, which is unlikely, but at 345k, he's easy enough to slot in. So yeah, so not too concerned about the second row and those Roosters options. We'll give them a bit of a look and we'll go from there. Yeah, so we'll definitely play Benny Trebojevic and have a bit of a look. And yeah, obviously our VC and C isn't affected, unlike what I guess it would be in fantasy. Um, so I guess, yeah, just before we wrap it up, I better give the leagues a bit of a pump up. So I don't know what's happened, but someone's left the second Supercoach Nuffs league. So if you're interested in joining in there, you can with the league code 207325. But I guess the main one we want to try and fill up is the third league. So maybe even if you've joined one of the other two and want to get in another one, feel free. So the league code there 303765. But I will put the direct links in the description as what we've done previously, so you can just jump straight in that way. But yeah, if we can get one more in for the draft to sort of organise that, that would be amazing. And if we can fill up these other leagues, obviously that would be pretty cool too. But as always, if you've got any questions, comments, thoughts, please feel free to add them below the video. Give us a like if you enjoy the Supercoach content. Subscribe for all the fantasy content we've got on the channel. And other than that, we'll catch you in the next one.